Welcome to Inspire and Move, the show that inspires you to create, connect, and grow. I'm going to bring you meaningful conversations, aha moments, and all the motivation you need to up-level every part of your life. I'm Ali Aruda, founder of Inspire and Move, and your personal hype girl. I've gone from fashion school to celebrity stylist to corporate marketing to brick and mortar entrepreneurship with my husband, each time learning incredible lessons how to pivot, reimagine, and implement the steps to become successful. I am passionate about inspiring others to live their best life, a life of joy. We have the power to design a life that we love because life is too short not to. The best part is that you weren't meant to do this alone. If you feel like you were meant for more, let me ride shotgun with you, and together, let's get you to where you want to go. So this is really exciting. I am really freaking pumped to be here right now because when I hit go on committing to launching the Inspire and Move podcast, there was one person at the very top of my list, and that was Lori Harder. And she is here in the house. We are recording at DreamX Studios in beautiful Newport Beach, which you might get a new neighbor soon because Matt and I are really obsessed with this place.
Don't. If you're seriously?
I'm going to tell you right now, live on air.
Okay.
That's a surprise.
I mean, I would love that to be like a dream come true. Remember when I was like, you were looking at Arizona? I was like, okay, also here's one other that you need to look at.
Yeah, I see why you presented that. Yes. Matt is here, but he actually is not here because he's having lunch by himself and exploring beautiful Newport.
Yeah, good luck. You're going to have some real estate.
Oh, I'm obsessed. So I am so excited and grateful to have you here. And I cannot wait to dive into all of my amazing notes that I've just made kind of leading up to today's interview. We are going on a nice journey. And for those of you that listening that don't know, I mean, it might be under a rock, but for those of you that don't know, Lori's journey has not always been smooth. There's been some turbulence, and I feel like that's for maybe a lot of us with some of our great, powerful journeys come with some turbulence. And it's a real testament to you and Chris, your grit, determination, and your rise from, then till now. And for anyone listening that's not really aware of your journey, I would love to know a little bit, or love for you to share a little bit about what that journey has included.
Oh my gosh. You know what's crazy is the older you get, the journey gets a little longer. So I'm learning let's see if we can size this down. But I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and let's lower the expectation. Okay, here we go.
Love it.
Here we go.
Boom. Go.
All right. I was not raised in an entrepreneurial family. Like I just thought you work hard, and that is your life journey. Like you work hard and you struggle, and there's, family and great things along the way. But I didn't have any big aspirations because I didn't really see that growing up. So I grew up in a small town in Upper Michigan, which I resonate with Canadians so much because truly I am more northern than parts of Canada. And so we had, I would say we even had more of a Canadian accent than some of you. So, yeah, I just have worked on it. But anyhow, small town in Upper Michigan, I was homeschooled through high school, and I was raised in a more restrictive religion. So the reason that I share that is because it took a small town and it made it even smaller. So I was only allowed to associate with people within that congregation. And at the time we had 114 people. And so, I pretty much set my goals and sights around what I saw, which was we were just, going to dedicate our lives to God and go door to door, which is amazing. But also as a teenager, I started to get these feelings of, I think there's more for me. And I think anyone listening to this podcast, I know if anybody is listening to your podcast, it is because they have that same exact feeling. And so you guys have probably all arrived at the feeling that I had from 14 to 18, where your reality does not match with what you are starting to hopefully see for yourself in the future and with what you want. So from 14 to 18 really became this time for me of going, who am I? Well, this doesn't match up. What am I going to do in the future? And so at 18, I ended up moving out of the house, and I did not turn into an entrepreneur at 18. I went crazy at 18 because it was like when a spring is held real tight and then you let go for a few years. And so that was my drinking, partying, drugs phase, and then woke up around 21 going, oh my gosh, that knocking in my soul, that same one, or that feeling that is it will not let you sleep at night is back. And I think you can try to numb it. You can try to do all of the things, but when you know, you know. And so around, that 24-ish age, I started to say, what on earth am I going to do with my life? Because I had not graduated. I had, no education. I didn't even have any friends at this point because I had left them all behind. They were all still, a lot of them were still in that religion, or they were the friends that were like bad news bears for me. At that point, I'm like, okay, we can't hang out anymore, because now they had gone so far the other way that now I was in a place where I was completely isolated. And so I ended up meeting my husband at 20. Well, I met him at 21, but we ended up getting married at 24. And that was when I just started kind of like dabbling in, maybe I could be a personal trainer. Maybe I could go do this thing. Except I failed that test twice. Who fails personal training tests twice?
There are going to be some tricky questions on there, anatomy.
It was a lot of anatomy, but also I learned, because I did go to school up until 8th grade, and I always had test anxiety. They didn't have words for it, like around it then. And all I knew is that everything made me nervous. So now I'm like, oh, you had test anxiety. Like I could never complete a test without freaking out. And so learned about all those things, ended up, finally passing this test, becoming a personal trainer, except I wind up doing personal training at an LA Fitness, and they're paying me $6 per 30-minute session. Oof. Yeah. Woof. It was like, okay, this is not so great. So fast forward, it is, I've been at this gym, or at LA Fitness, for probably a year, maybe a little bit longer than a year. And I had always told all of my clients like what my big dream was. I'm like, I want to own my own gym. I want to be on magazine covers. So I was always proclaiming it.
I feel so seen.
I did.
Feel so seen.
It's totally you to a T. But I didn't really know if I was going to take action on that. So 2008, my husband was in finance and mortgage. And what happened in 2008 was the recession hit. And so he lost his job. He was the main breadwinner of the home. I know that's shocking with me making $6 per 30-minute session.
Shocking.
But we literally we lost everything. We lost our homes. We lost our cars. We were $300,000 in debt. And then I am making no money to support us. Also, people were stopping, like everyone was kind of doing a little bit about what they're doing now. Like everyone was kind of like cutting back on everything. So I'm like, what are we going to do? And there was this moment where now I had gone through a bankruptcy with my parents when I was 14. And so this felt just like way too familiar. It was like so much on your nervous system that when it happened, he had came home and told me what was going on. And I just looked at him and I was like, this will never happen again. Like this will never happen again. Now, did I know what I was going to do? No, I still didn't graduate. I still had no money coming in, but something shifted in me that was like, you have to do something so different than what you are doing. You have to go and figure this out, and you have to face your fears. Because at the time, I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of anxiety, and I had a lot of like imposter syndrome, that if I went for something more, people would find out that I was a fraud. And truly, back in the day, not graduating, you were a fraud. They were like, education was 10 years ago, even education was like the biggest thing ever. It was just like, oh, where'd you go to school? What did you do? Oh, do you have the credentials for that? Now it's like everyone's a life coach, everyone's a trainer, everyone is something. But back then it was a really, really big deal. And so I never went for the big things up until that point. And so whenever people hit a wall or have a rock bottom, I'm always like, don't waste a good crisis. Like they're so powerful. Use them to force you out of the pain that you were in, because now it's like the pain of going for it isn't half as hard as what you're actually in.
I couldn't agree more. And I've said that a lot, that I had a few personal rock bottom moments happen in the similar time window. And it took me about a week or two to kind of come out of the true darkness and realize that, all right, when you're at rock bottom, it's actually sometimes a good place to be, because you can't go any lower than that.
No.
And the sooner we can figure that out, to be like, well, I can only go up from here. And then you go up, and then there's all this greatness to unlock and unfold. And you are a perfect example of that. And I'm so excited to really dive into that with the Glōci journey and the Glōci story. But I feel like as you were coming out of that with fitness and owning your own gym and taking on clients, you then eventually forayed into the world of personal development. And I really appreciate how important and impactful personal development is for you and Chris, and as individuals, your relationship, events that you do and lead, that you got into the world of live events and doing the Bliss Project. And remind me how many years you did Bliss Project?
I think we did 7 or 8.
My guess was 7. And closing that down. And what was your dream going from, this journey with training and owning your own gym to going into live events and curating that really for community and connection with this room full of women and seeing the transformation that they'd experience, but then making, I would imagine, a very difficult decision of closing that down for an even bigger dream?
Yeah, the reason I wanted to start Bliss Project was because growing up and even in my 20s, if you don't spot it, you can't make it happen for yourself. If you don't see it in your vicinity or in your friend circle, if it's not possible, then it's not, if it's not possible within your circle, it doesn't feel possible for you. So that's why everything that we've done is always about getting people in a room whose dreams, like your dreams, are their reality. And that's one of the most important things you can do, because then it can become your reality. All you have to do is go talk to them. And all of a sudden you figure out that they're just people as well. Like, online is great and following people, but when you actually meet them, there's something so different about that, where they, a lot of people, I'm not going to say all people, but a lot of people, they want you to be successful. So they're going to tell you what it really felt like, or they're going to tell you, how long it's actually going to take and what it's going to look like. But stopping the Bliss Project it's funny because 2020 was our last year. It was going to be our last year. We had all of these epic speakers lined up and all the tickets were sold. We sold out early that year.
Oh, no.
We're like, oh my God, record setting, so exciting. And we start hearing, we're 2 weeks out and we start hearing that things are closing. I'm like, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And I was like, we were at an event. We were at one of our events on a break. And so Chris and I were having a glass of wine before we went into the evening portion of the event. And I go, okay, if NBA shuts down, then we'll close, then we'll call it. And literally while we're sitting there, this news alert comes up that all basketball games had stopped. And I was like, oh my God, this is my worst nightmare. Cause you put money down on a venue, and we had booked at the Ritz-Carlton, the most expensive venue we had ever booked at, with everything paid for. And everybody was just left with holding the bag. It was the craziest experience of my life. But before I did that event, I knew it was my last one. And what's bizarre is not bizarre. I think everybody, if you start really tuning in, you kind of know when your chapter is closing. And I think that people get afraid or sad. I've never been sad to close them, because I always have mentally started shifting into what's next and how those people are going to come with me. So it's never this is ending. It's always you guys, the boat's just turning. You're all still on the ship. We're doing a different destination now, because we've gone to Cabo 15 times. We need to start going somewhere else, and that's just always how I viewed it, is all of these people who have come with me have, hopefully, if I've done my job right, hopefully they've learned and they're ready for that next level too. And not everyone is, but those people can follow. And also the people that you have talked to on your podcast and that you've had at all of your events, as you grow and get into different things, what happens is women from your community will now be ready, if your community isn't yet, will now be ready to kind of take the torch and help those people who are still at that level. If you're not feeling called to working with maybe entry-level entrepreneurs or entry-level people in personal development. And I think where people get really stagnant and stuck is because they stay in that same exact place when really they want to be teaching about kind of the next level on their journey.
I love that perspective, and that's something, thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that was a really powerful takeaway. And we have conversations at home, Matt and I, about building community and our business and shifts and changes, that I think there is so much power that comes from getting in rooms with higher level individuals and people that have been doing it longer and people that are doing it better than you.
Yes.
Because there's
always someone doing it better and longer.
Yeah. And there's always something to learn. And, at the time of recording this, tomorrow is dinner series event number 2, which is all about this with higher level networking and getting in these rooms and conversations. Matt and I were actually having this conversation on the weekend of, what are you most excited about? Having one already, coming into number 2.
I'm like, do tell.
Yeah. Well, actually, and then we both got stumped because we're like, where are we going in with from a perspective? And I actually think we want to go in just for relationship capital.
Yes, totally.
We just are craving a bit of a refresher from deep relationships, deep conversations, and people that are doing big things that have maybe been doing it longer, better, that will understandably be different things than what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's just coming down to the people that are in the room and the relationships that are fostered from a room like that versus going in with a specific ask.
I for sure have been, like, especially as you get more clear on who you are and what your business is, then you get to go in the rooms like that, like with no agenda. And what's cool about that is the magic then comes to you, because I think it's important to like set an intention, but then be super open. Not that agendas are bad. I think it's really important when you're first networking for something specific and putting it out there. But it's cool also to be able to go in and just be like, man, we really want some high level friends. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And that will bring magic to your life.
And I think it also took like a little bit of time to get to that and
Totally
feel like we could give ourselves the permission.
Oh my God, it took me years. You're way faster than me.
Well, I'm learning from great people that have been doing it longer and better than us.
Yes,
So
you get the shortcuts. Good.
Yes,
It's
the
worth it.
shortcuts. Matt uses that term all the time. Okay, speaking of cut, I want to just like cut over to Lite Pink because we have so much to unpack about Lite Pink turn Glōci. And I want to chat a little bit about your vision. Like, where were you when you came up with the idea for Lite Pink and starting a company, starting a product company, a beverage company?
Okay, so it was around the Bliss Project time where I knew that was my last one. I don't know why I knew. I just knew I wanted to be teaching on other things. Like, it felt like taking women for 3 days, just not just, but around changing their story and their beliefs. Like, I was like, these women have been with me like 8 years or longer, because, I had done it longer than that. I'm like, we got our beliefs.
Yeah.
Like, they're all itching. So I'm watching a lot of them. Like, I'm feeling this desire in me to be teaching on these things I'm learning about, like these new big ideas that are like literally rocking my world and like bringing me to my knees with excitement. I'm just so excited about it. And so I think it felt like going back somewhere that I was like, you're just done, And so I wanted to make it a great event, but at the same time, like, I knew I was done. So COVID happened, didn't have to do it. But anyway,
yeah, that's a wrap.
It would have been awesome. But in terms of Lite Pink, like where that even came from was I started asking myself the question, like, what is next? Like, what on earth is next? And you guys, I had written a book at this point and I toured it like 8 different cities or something. We did a year-long tour. So it was like 4 or 5 cities in each one. And I loved it. But after I wrote the book, I was like, man, that was super lonely. Like, I don't know if I want to do that again. And I write books on like female friendships and connection and networking. And guess what? Writing a book it's isolation for like a very long time. And so you teach what you need the most, and you also write books on what you need the most. And I was like, okay, I don't want to jump into this again because I feel really lonely. And then at the time, I got to meet one of the top authors and speakers like in the moment. And I went to dinner with her, and I think she was on number 140 something of speaking. And she was like, I'm dead inside. I don't know what I'm doing. And I thought, here's why this is significant. I thought that was my goal. And so I had this moment of, like, when we left, I said to Chris, I go, oh my God, I just had the realization that so many dreams that I choose have a horrible day-to-day life.
Oh.
And it like rocked me because now I had no dream. I have always had a dream. Like, since I was little, I was like, there's something there. I got to figure it out. Whether it was like, even when I was young, even though I couldn't name it, it was like performer or dancer or something. I was like, I'm in front of people. I don't know what that looks like. So all of a sudden, I don't have a dream. I don't know what to do. And I don't want the dream that I had. And so I started asking, like, it was when you do this long enough, meaning just like, follow your calling or start businesses or have your business, you are going to hit like places where you have years of pivot or you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And it feels, you kind of like, you feel like you're moving into a full new identity. And I'm learning how to support myself better through it. But if this is your first time or you haven't heard this before, like be prepared because it will happen. And you'll wonder what's wrong with you. And you'll think you lost all motivation. And you'll think like, oh my God, what's wrong? I don't want to do this. I can't imagine doing this anymore. How am I going to make money? How am I going to like all the things? And that's such a good place to be because you don't want to be there all the time, but that means your next level is requiring like a little stillness and a little attention. And there's something so much bigger than you can possibly fathom. And this will continue to happen. I kind of feel like Chris and I were talking. I feel like I'm going to come up with like some framework because I think it's like a 7-year cycle.
Oh,
of like changing who you are and like how you show up. So I'm going to see if this comes through. But anyway, so it's just was this moment of, I want to bring women with me. And what is that? So I started asking myself this question. If I had all the time, all the money, and all the network in the world, what would I be doing? And the reason that I wanted to ask those questions was because if we don't ask ourselves those questions for what's next, we will set our goal and our future based on our current skill set and the current person that we are. And so in our current, like what we're able to like use and what we have at our fingertips, where that is absolutely not going to be the case for your future. Like, so if I would have set a goal from who I thought I was then and what I, was able to like get as far as resources and people, guess what I would have been doing? I would have written another book and I would have done another event. And so if I had all the time, which I didn't, but I knew I could create it, if I got really, really smart, I could start creating more time. If I had all the money, which I didn't, but I knew that I could learn to raise it because it was in my friend network. Someone had done it and I had gotten really vulnerable and told them, hey, and I wasn't telling people at the time. Like, I don't think I started telling people I didn't graduate high school till like 2020. And like, it took me that long. Like I just avoided the subject. So I told this person like, hey, I'm not good with numbers. I didn't graduate high school. Do you think I can raise money? They're like, yeah, because you get like an attorney, they help you with it. Are you a good storyteller? And I'm like, I can get better. He's like, great, awesome. So, and then all of the network, which at the time, like, yeah, I had a decent network, but I didn't have anyone in products. Like I didn't have really anyone in CPG. I followed women founders in different things, but I wasn't like friends with them. They didn't feel accessible yet at all. So asking those 3 questions, let my answers be unlimited. And they feel crazy because you're like, I don't know. I had so many different ideas because I asked myself this for a year. And, which the weirdest thing, one concept I came up with, it was, I'm like, was this? Oh yeah, it's like during COVID. So why am I asking myself this question? But I came up with like a brick and mortar that would be called brunch. And it was pretty much just brunch, but you had to dress up and do all these things and drink champagne. And one of the investors in Lite Pink has a location that is just brunch called brunch. I thought that was the weirdest.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
When she told me later, I was like, oh my God, I have this theory. It's not really my theory. It's actually like a theory that is out there. But I think ideas are all like up in a cloud all at the same time for that time in history. And you just have to like make yourself really available for them. And they're going to land, if they don't land on you, like literally they're going to land on the person next to you. So you have to be ready to receive them because I think that there's millions of ideas up there right now waiting for the person to just be super open and ready to bring them to life right now. And in 10 years, all those ideas will be different. It's like what the world needs right now.
That's an amazing story. So it's like something that you got, but by way of one of your investors.
Yeah, so weird. So anyway, that's where Lite Pink came from. It was like, well, so I'd written the book, A Tribe Called Bliss. And the book did well, but it really didn't hit the mainstream market that I want. I mean, you know me. I like to so picture I'm in personal development and I'm in fitness. I'm like, I'm not like the mainstream girls. What are they doing? They're all getting together and drinking wine and maybe like, I don't know what else they're doing because I kind of wasn't in that world at the time. And so I was like, okay, we hit the personal development market, but I want to hit those girls who are actually really struggling with this. Because at the time I had moved to LA and I was going to these big events and networking things and looking around going, this really sucks. Like nobody's getting what they need and nobody's really talking. Like we're not having conversations. It's more like a who's who and look at me type of thing. And so I thought, what if I made a lighter wine spritz? Because spritzes had or seltzers had just come out, but they were kind of trashy looking and they were like
Terrible
made you
packaging.
feel terrible also. And I was like, what if it made you feel like okay? And it was wine and it was beautiful packaging. We had 3 questions on the back of the can that if you even looked at them and thought to ask them to another woman, like you would get an answer that you needed. And so it was just at the time in that moment, and there were some other like D2C companies, direct to consumer, like wine companies that were doing really well and were getting acquired. And then COVID hits and they were doing even better for a little while, for a little flash in the pan. So this felt like a great idea to go with. And that's how it started.
I love that. And I love that you also leaned into the investors and what your vision was behind that. Now, did you always have a number in mind of how many investors how many women, because I know that you wanted female investors? Was it a number that felt right, or was it more so the higher level of like the dollar figure of like this?
It was
the goal?
The number that I wanted to raise. Yep. So however many women that took to raise that, which now that's a whole other podcast we can do, like on raising money and what I would do differently now. But it worked out perfectly. I think that what I would have done is done a little bit higher number for like a set number of people, just because the amount of time I spent the amount of time that I spent raising was a full-time job for like a year, literally.
I can appreciate that.
So it was also like the number of times that even excited people you have to have touch points with is like minimum 7 to 8 with the people who want to invest. Now imagine the people who you're like working on, and it's just like tracking it and like remembering the conversations and staying on top of them enough, but not too much. And then getting on new conversations and, while you're trying to get your company going, but you don't quite have the dollar amount you want in the bank yet. It's just, it's a whole thing.
What was I, like 1 to 2 touch points?
You were probably you and Lindsay were probably my easiest.
Ever quick.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
when you're like, oh my God, thank you.
Well, I remember that. And I mean, I remember hearing you talk about the journey of building Lite Pink and building this whole journey with investors and female investors as a podcast of somebody in your community listening to the podcast. And in 2020, so that like really vibrant year of transformation, let's call it.
Such a great year.
We were gym owners. So shocking, had a lot of free time on my hands. And I read a ton of books that year, all very focused personal development, one of my favorite genres, if you will. And I read this book called She Means Business by Carrie Green. And it's a great book. And I thought, well, I have the time, so I will do all of the journal prompts and take the action steps necessary. And so this is my fun story for you that I told you I had story time in the middle of the podcast. And one of the questions was, who are some people or a couple that you really admire? And you and Chris were on the list, as well as Katrina and Brian Scott, actually.
That's hilarious.
And then like a very similar question a couple chapters later of like, who would you, whether you know them or not, who's someone that you would love to work with? Guess whose name was on the list again? Lori and Chris Harder, Katrina and Brian Scott. And Carrie and I did the rest of the exercises. And then I think I had shared Earn Your Happy episode that resonated and tagged it, and you replied to this story and you had acknowledged that, I see you love wine. Do you invest?
That's right.
And I was like, well, I do love wine, and I probably share that a bit too much on Instagram. But I was
like, this is great.
Yes. And then that was the sort of conversion tool of setting up the call to chat about investing. But I actually remember prior to the call, which was the night of my virtual birthday party. There's a banger for you.
Yep.
It was a couple days before the call, and you had sent me the deck just to sort of review everything, which I think I went to page 2, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I wonder how much money she needs. But on the page, whatever number it was, you had the advisory board.
Oh, that's right.
And guess who was on the advisory board?
Katrina.
And it was one of those like universe aha moments that I'm like, this shit is so cool. You talk about it, you dream about it, you write it down, and who knows what the timeline is that takes to put it into action. And I am so glad that I did those questions and wrote that down in the notebook and took the time in 2020, because here we are 4 years later sitting together having this conversation and celebrating this massive pivot into Glōci. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to me if you took 30 seconds and shared this on social media, send it to a friend, or leave a 5-star review. There is power in community, and I am so grateful to have you part of mine.